we should, in theory, there is a theory here somewhere, because it says we have an excellent connection and my hair is perfect.
Yes, but now we've finally shown up over there, so now I think they can finally see and hear us.
Well, there are some people.
Good evening, everyone.
There are some people watching, so just let us know if you can see us. It's nice to be seen.
The internet's been up and down today, and the shop has no internet service.
It has no phones, no internet, no ability to process credit cards, so it's just going wonderfully swimmingly.
Fun day all around. But anyway, here we are.
Tell your friends. So let us know you can see us, and we will begin with our thrilling tale.
I think we should recap from She Was a Dark Woman.
A dark woman. We could
do
that.
We could 28.
Do that, but somebody's going to chime in, because I see people are watching us. So if you can see us, put us out of our misery. Let us know you can see us. Just go, yeah, have at it, and we'll start. There you go. Good evening.
Good evening.
Well, actually, Yoff just said good evening, not that he can see us.
Can you guys see us and
Can
hear
you
us?
see us?
I think
Do we
you
exist?
can.
Are we alive?
We don't trust the internet today.
Is this thing on? Tap, tap, tap. Yay!
Yes.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, who's starting? Right. You, me starting? Who's starting?
Yes, and we can see you. All right. She was a dark woman, brown-eyed, black-browed, slightly aquiline, and her skin was a very pale olive, more creamy than olive, in fact. Her eyes were not darkened with mascara. They did not need it. But her lips were pillar box scarlet.
Oh my.
She had long, slender white hands, too, and the nails were filed to a point and looked as if they had been dipped in blood.
Oh my.
So altogether, what with the black furs and the white face and splashes of scarlet at her mouth and nails, she was a pretty startling figure to let loose on a bachelor from a one-eyed hole like Dickford. That's an interesting sentence.
Ooh.
As she opened her coat, a whiff of scent, aromatic and spicy, not sweet, came across me. It was a very queer scent, and I think there was a good deal of musk in it.
Oh, say no more, say no more.
I took a reef in my backbone and thought hard about estate agenting.
Get a grip now, get a grip. It's just the English thing. Remember, sex is what the kale comes in.
What age do you suppose I am? She asked. I looked at her. Her skin was perfectly smooth and unlined, just like ivory white velvet. I had never seen such a lovely skin. It was as different from my sister's as chalk and cheese. All the same, the eyes were not the eyes of a girl. There were no pouches round them. The skin was quite taut, like a young woman's, but the eyes themselves had a peculiar expression of quiet watchfulness that goes with experience.
They say witches don't age, you know.
She certainly was not a young girl, despite her figure. I was quite prepared to concede that. But would Miss LaFay Morgan be so... I could think of no other word than Scotty's dreadful expression, well preserved. She seemed to guess my thoughts. So you don't believe in the power of beauty parlors to preserve one's youth, she said. Not to the extent to which you have preserved it, I said frankly. Not even with glandular treatment? Frankly, no. But supposing all this were backed up by the knowledge of mind power, I hesitated, and there suddenly came to my memory another face I had seen, a face uncommonly like hers, the face of the sea priestess of my vision, who had sat in the great carved chair on the high stern...
Poop?
Stern poop?
Yes, the poop deck. You don't go poop on the poop deck. It's a nautical term, people.
I forgot about that.
It's a nautical term. She was on a boat.
On the high stern poop, reading the book with heavy clasps. The effect on me was extraordinary. For a moment, I was back on the estuary in the sea mist at dusk. All sense of time and place were gone, and I had slipped into timelessness. I suppose my face must have shown what I felt, for I saw Miss Morgan Le Fay's dark eyes suddenly glow like lamps. I came back to normal and looked at her. It was a queer situation. There she was in her handsome furs, and there I was in my old raincoat, and yet there was something between us that was very queer. I thought of that marvelous scene in Rider Haggard's stories where she's hand comes through the curtains. It was as if a woman opposite me had laid her hand on a curtain and could, if she chose, draw it back and reveal something very strange indeed.
Oh my.
Then she spoke. I am far from being a young woman, she said. I was not a young woman when I joined Miss Morgan. If you look closely, you will see that. I have cared for my skin, and my figure has taken care of itself, that's all. Her ways were certainly not the ways of a young woman, but we had had her name on the books getting on for half a century. At the very least, she must be rising 70? It took a lot of swallowing. Well, Miss Morgan, I said, I really don't know that this is any business of ours, what your age is. What an awkward sentence. Okay, like he's saying the estate agents don't really need to know how old.
Yes, it doesn't really matter what age you are.
We shall send the checks to the address we have always sent them to, and we shall be satisfied the receipts we have always had. I don't suppose I am particularly competent to form an opinion. You look very young to me, but if you say it is just the result of taking care of yourself, I'm not in a position to dispute it. I thought you were an authority on antiques, said Miss LaFay Morgan, with a mischievous smile, and made me laugh, which I had not meant to do. However, she let the curtain fall back again, and I think we were both breathed more freely. She got up and walked over to the window. How much longer do you suppose this downpour is going to go on? Not long like this, I said. As soon as it lets up a bit, I will slip out and get the car. She nodded negligently and stood gazing out of the window with her back to me, lost in thought. I wondered what she had to think about. If she really were Miss LaFay Morgan, she must have had plenty. She probably remembered the Franco-Prussian War, if not the Crimea.
Oh my goodness.
I was trying to sum up how far we were involved if we kept our mouths shut and did nothing about it. Of course, she wasn't Miss Morgan the first antiquated companion. I may be pretty green about women, but I'm not as green as all that. I wondered what had become of the original Miss LaFay Morgan. I had read a detective story once where a wealthy old dame had died on the continent and the companion had impersonated her. There was no reason to
Presuppose murder.
Even as Miss Morgan
The second.
the second were not forthcoming. Miss Morgan the third might have ministered to her last moments most dutifully and then planted her perfectly respectably. Planted her. It was not improbable that Miss Morgan the second had followed from the example of the first, and having no little nephews and nieces left everything to her faithful companion, a very decent thing to do in my opinion, and infinitely better than organized charity. Then there might have been some hitch in the will. It wasn't witnessed or something, and the faithful companion saw that she had been promised going to some fourth cousin, twice removed, who already had more than needed and had taken the will for the deed, literally as well as metaphorically, forgotten to inform us of the funeral and trace the signature on the receipts.
Interesting.
You want to go?
He's suggesting that, well, if you want to go through to the end, I'll take chapter 6 if you want.
All right. I suppose all this reasoning was pretty suspicious if one looked at it closely. One thing was quite certain, however. I had no mind to turn to private detective and put my head in the hornet's nest from purely altruistic motives. I would not go so far as to say I had taken a liking to Miss LaFay Morgan. I distrusted her too much for that. But I found her decidedly stimulating.
Say no more.
There was a sort of thing I had wanted to go to London for. I had hoped that writing women would be of this type. Ooh. But I expect if I had got there, I should have found out my mistake.
Oh my.
The only authoress I've ever saw looked like Ophelia from the Mad Scene, and you couldn't tell where the hair ended and the straws began.
Oh dear. He has a very dim view of women, doesn't he, bless him?
Miss LeFay Morgan seemed to have forgotten my existence, and I was very anxious not to commit myself in any way till I had talked things over with Scotty and Headley.
Headley, our solicitor. Oh, best get some legal briefing.
We did not want to let her in as accessories after the fact. They don't want to be in trouble.
Accessory
If there was
after the
anything
fact,
fishy had been afoot. I could not imagine anything more likely to make you commit yourself than being shut up alone with Miss LeFay Morgan in an empty villa during a thunderstorm. So I sidled quietly across the room without drawing attention to myself, turned up my coat collar, and slipped out the door. The rain was coming down in sheets, and wind behind it that drove it down my neck.
Oh, that was
but it
pleasant.
couldn't be helped, so I put my best foot foremost and legged it to the car. Then I collected Miss Morgan and drove her to her hotel. She blew me up in a most motherly manner for having gone out in the rain, and if I looked half as sheepish as I felt, I must have looked like the prize sheep. She warned me to stop and have tea with her. She wanted me to stop and have tea with her, but I wouldn't, saying I must go home and get changed, which was the sober truth. But even if it hadn't been, I should have said it, for I had quite enough of Miss LeFay Morgan for one afternoon.
Well, the plot thickens, tell your friends.
Oh, dear.
Tell your friends. No, we weren't delayed. Well, we weren't delayed. No. Shana, the whole thing's delayed. Magical Monday came out Wednesday, and now we're doing this on Wednesday night.
But we started at 8.
But we started at 8, so maybe your thing's on the blink. Who knows? Anyway, chapter 6. Of course, the inevitable happened, and I developed a feverish cold and went down with a go of asthma. That's what getting wet will do you. Miss LeFay Morgan rang up the office to make another appointment, as if she hadn't finished her business with me. Scotty told her I was ill and offered himself. She waved him aside and demanded details of my symptoms, which Scotty wouldn't give, disapproving of her thoroughly. Finally, one of them hung up on the other, but I was never able to find out which.
Ruh-roh.
Ruh-roh indeed. Scotty went and saw Headley and put the worst possible face on everything. But Headley told him to shut his mouth and look the other way, as he couldn't prove a damn thing, and he'd better not try. You can't have an inquest unless you have a corpse, and as there wasn't any corpse, so far as we knew, or at any rate if there were, Miss LeFay Morgan was walking about inside it. I have a suspicion that Scotty also consulted Headley about the possible effect Miss Morgan might have on my morals, and that Headley thought she might be good for me.
Oh dear.
Oh dear, oh dear. Anyway, Scotty drew blank at both boroughs and came home in a bad temper. Then he gave me a talking to, but I wheezed at him and pretended to be semi-conscious. If you've got to have asthma, you might as well get some good out of it. Anyway, I gathered one thing from the rather heated one-sided conversation, that I should not be required to track Miss LeFay Morgan to earth in the interests of abstract justice, a thing for which I have never been able to work up the slightest enthusiasm. Scotty went back to the office noise, sweetened in temper by the interview, and, I rather fancy, made the office boy's life a burden to him. Anyway, the office boy got back at him in a very unexpected manner, and one that had far-reaching consequences in my affairs. The office boy has the job of working the switchboard of the telephone extensions, and the trouble is that if you get a boy intelligent enough to manage the switchboard, he's intelligent enough to take an interest in the conversations. And this particular office boy had apparently been listening in while Scotty and Miss Morgan had spat at each other and had drawn his own conclusions as to the lie of the land. At any rate, when a lovely lady walked into the office next afternoon and demanded news of me, he did not refer to her did not refer her to Scotty in the inner office, but acted on his own responsibility and told her everything he knew. And a lot he didn't.
Uh-oh.
I shouldn't be surprised if half a crown changed hands either. Anyway, the office boy played hooky from the choir practice that night and went to the pictures. This I know because the vicar asked my sister to ask me to speak to him, which I declined to do, it not being my business, and in any case a decidedly mean advantage to take of the kid.
Well, need money to go to the movies.
Neither my sister, nor the vicar, nor Scotty, needless to say, ever heard a breath of Miss LaFay Morgan. The youth was a sportsman. Shrewd fella, if you ask me.
That's funny.
Now, whether it was the half-crowns or pure chivalry, I shall never know. And it's not a question I should care to put, or one to which I should be likely to receive a true answer if I put it. But the office boy led the lovely lady down into the basement and out into the backyard and through the shrubbery, down to my abode. He put his head in at the kitchen window and called to Sally, as he was in the habit of doing when he brought my letters, and Sally unlatched the door and let him climb down through the window and let himself in. As she was in the habit of doing with anyone like himself or Scotty, whom she knew well. And in marched the youth, and up the stairs, and showed Miss LaFay Morgan into my room, without pausing to inquire whether I was suitably clad. Ruh-roh. Needless to say, I wasn't. Being in pyjamas and a dressing gown, though, thank God, I had shaved. I am the person responsible for your illness. I thought I'd better come and tell you how sorry I am, said Miss LaFay Morgan. I was so completely taken aback I could only stare at her. I had just had a shot of dope, and that is a thing that it does not quicken the wits, though it may loosen the tongue under certain circumstances, I was to find at my cost. I started to get up off the sofa and do the polite, but she pushed me back again and covered me with the rug, most motherly. Then she sat down beside me on the big poof and intended
That's a
for my
hassock.
Yes.
A poof is a hassock.
P-O-U-F, poof. Yes, a hassock, yes. Or a, whatever it is. Like an ottoman thing, but stuffed, you know. You can sit on it.
Poofy.
It's like a formal beanbag, I guess.
Why aren't
Yes.
you in bed?
Why aren't you in bed, she said. Would you like to carry on?
Because I hate being in bed, I said. I would much sooner get up and wander about. Now, theoretically, I am entirely unconventional. But never having had anything to do with unconventional women, I was thoroughly off my stroke with her. And as prime as a curate. Prim?
Prim as a curate. That's an expression I do not know.
Prim as a curate.
Prim as a curate. I shall try and use it 3 times tomorrow. Just
My
to
head
confuse
was
people.
also very swimmy with the dope, and I did not know exactly what I might be saying or doing next if I let myself go under the circumstances. Alone like this, with a woman who I knew to be a bohemian.
A bohemian.
I was like a teeter-totter.
Teetotaler at his first cocktail party. It's a word you Americans don't know these things. Teetotaler. It's somebody who doesn't drink at all.
Doesn't drink alcohol.
Doesn't drink at all at his first cocktail party. Pray
All right.
continue.
Miss LaFay Morgan began to smile. It is against professional etiquette to make friends with a client, she said. Is it? Is it?
Is it against etiquette?
Oh.
We ask ourselves.
Uh-oh. No, I said. It's not going against professional etiquette. But I think that a man is a fool who does it.
Oh my.
Oh, she looked taken aback for a minute. I had spoken, I was damned sorry, and felt that I had thrown away such a chance as would never come my way again. For this was the very thing I had wanted to go to London for. And yet I couldn't break out of my shell and meet in the halfway. I guessed it was the dope that was letting me down. Whatever it is comes out, apparently under the influence of dope. I flattered myself I should have managed to be a bit more tactful than that if I was sober in my senses. Miss Morgan looked at me pretty sharply, and I guess She saw I wasn't my normal self. At any rate, she took no notice of my rudeness and turned the conversation. "What a charming room you have," she said. I acquiesced gratefully. "I have often wondered," she said, "what sort of house people choose for themselves who know all there is to know about houses." I thought that if she could see Scotty's abode, or the main building for that matter, she would be disillusioned. She began to walk around and look at my books, which made me squirm. I hate people looking at my books. They're too revealing. I especially hated Miss Morgan looking at them, for I was certain she was the at last word in sophistication and culture, and I'm not. My books are a miscellaneous collection, I think. She made me squirm. She was a most perceiving person, for she turned away from my books and went over to the window and looked out. I am not responsible for the landscape, so I didn't mind that. Then she heard the voice in the weir.
Ooh.
"Is that the river down below you?" she said. I told her it was. "The one that comes out of Dickmouth?" I told her that was so. "That it is the narrow Dick," I said. "Where the broad Dick is, I have never been able to discover. It is not so marked on the maps." "There is no broad Dick," she said. "The original name of the river was River Narrodeck. Narrow Dick is only a corruption of that." "How do you know that?" I said. "Because I'm interested in such things, and I've looked it up," she said. "Where did you get a hold of it?" said I, for I was keen on the archaeology of this district myself, and thought I knew pretty thoroughly, but I had never come across that before. She smiled a queer smile. "If I told you, you wouldn't believe me, any more than you believe me when I tell you that I am Vivian LeFay Morgan." There was something startlingly familiar about that name, completely distracted my attention for a moment. I couldn't think where I had heard it before, or what was the significance attached to it, and yet I felt sure that I had a very vital significance if I could just recall it. Miss LeFay Morgan smiled again. "I suppose you do not know it," she said, "but although you got my name right at Dickmouth today, you are calling me Miss Morgan Le Fay." Then I remembered. Morgan Le Fay was the name of King Arthur's witch sister, to whom Merlin taught all his secret knowledge. She smiled again. "I am part Breton, part Welsh," she said. "My father called me Vivian after Vivian Le Fay, the wicked young witch who beguiled Merlin in his old age in the forest of Brooklade. Perhaps he was right. I do not know. But Miss Morgan would never call me that. She hated it. And when she left me her money, she stipulated that I could take her name. I wonder what she would have said if she had heard your version of it." I don't think he was that inappropriate.
No, you could keep going on.
It rubbed my fur the wrong way to hear her lying. I wasn't going to acquiesce, and I couldn't very well tell her to her face that I disbelieved her, so I offered no comment, changed the subject. "You still haven't told me your authority for the statement that the name of Narrow Dick was Narrodeck. Are you keen on archaeology?" "On local archaeology, yes, very." "Then perhaps you can tell me the whereabouts of the cave under the Bell Knoll, where the tide rises and falls." For a moment I was about to answer her, for I knew exactly where the cave was. I had a perfectly clear picture in my mind's eye. It was in a particular fold in the side of the hill towards the old bed of the river. Now it's dry, save for a slender trickle on the surface. Then all of a sudden I remembered the only thing I knew about the cave I had learnt in the curious dream. I had had of the coming sea priestess, and the woman in the front of the cave was strangely like the sea priestess. I raised myself up on one elbow and stared at her. I couldn't speak. I was utterly bewildered. She looked at me with a very curious expression in her eyes, and I think she too was surprised. She hadn't expected such a reaction. "Is there any such cave about here, or any tradition of such a cave?" I shook my head. "Not to my knowledge." Then why did you react so violently when I asked about a sea cave? What do you know about it? I was at a disadvantage. I could only roll over on my pillow and stare out the window. She kept silent and waited. She knew I would have to answer her sooner or later. But I wasn't in the mood when I didn't care. Dope always has this effect on me. I rolled back and faced her. Well, if you want to know, I said, I had a very curious experience recently after I had an injection of morphia. I suppose that's morphine.
It is.
I dreamed of the country around here as it must have been in prehistoric times, and there was a sea cave, though there isn't now, because the sea has receded and the river shifted and the cave silted up. I have traced that cave, and it is probably there all right, though you can't see it. It gave me a queer turn to find the signs of it in the fold of the rocks, but one can explain that by subconscious memory. But it gave me a much queer turn to hear you refer to it, for I have never spoken of it to a living soul. Did you dream of it too, or is it a thing that you know historically?
Shall I carry on?
Yep.
I did not dream of it. I saw it in a crystal.
What?
Good Lord, said
In
I.
a crystal?
Where are we getting to? That is what I would like to know, said she. Look here, I said. I've got a load of dope on board, and I think I'd better keep quiet. I'm only talking nonsense. Not at all, said she. You are talking perfectly good sense, though I admit you would be wise to choose your audience. Pardon me. I laughed. I think I was half tipsy with the drug. You wouldn't think I was talking sense, I said, if I told you the whole of that dream, for I saw you in it. And if you believe that, I'll believe that you are Miss LeFay Morgan, or Morgan Le Fay, for the matter of that. She looked at me, and her eyes suddenly glowed, as they had done when she saw the effect she had on me when she put back her collar on that first day. I know you speak the truth, she said slowly, for I saw you recognize me when I showed you my face. Yes, I recognized you all right, I said, and laughed. Don't laugh like that, she said. You set my teeth on edge. I beg your pardon, said I. It is a mad world, my masters. No, said she, not mad, weak-minded. And you and I are just a little bit saner than most. And we are fortunate enough to have met each other. Let's put the cards on the table, shall we? I will tell you what I know if you will tell what you know. This was not a proposition to put before a house agent, especially one who had been trained by Scotty, but I was dead to the wide, and shot full of dope, and fed up to the teeth with my illness, and I just didn't care. At that moment, if my life went up in flames, or fell into the cellars, or blew to glory generally, that must be my excuse, if indeed excuse is needed. So I told her. It was very difficult to tell coherently, and of course I began at the wrong end. But by dint of questioning and patience, she got it pieced together. You got the sea priestess through the moon, she said, for the moon rules the sea. They are not two separate experiences, but two consecutive parts of the same experience. And now you have got me. I am the third part of the experience that completes it, you know. I gently pressed the tender spot on my arm where Beardmore, our medico, had shoved in his needle. I have a lot of dope, I said. I guess you are a hallucination, she laughed. Now I will tell you my half of the story, she said, and then you shall judge. Should I continue?
Yeah, we usually go for a little while.
All right.
Chapter 7.
It was chapter 7 we're up to. It was certainly a startling tale Miss LeFay Morgan told, and boiled down, it amounted to this. Her ancestors had been a Huguenot family from Brittany.
What?
Years.
Wendy!
Who had settled in England at the time of the revocation of the Edict of Nantes. They had married other French refugees and had later intermarried with the English, and all had gone on quite peacefully until the last of the line. Her father had married a Welsh woman, and then the two Celtic stocks, the Breton and the Welsh, had reinforced each other and produced her. I am fey by nature, as well as by name, she said.
Oh, tuatha di danon.
And then her father died, and she, what do they call it in Welsh? I can't remember.
The tuatha di danon?
No,
in
that's
Welsh?
Irish. That's Irish.
But
That's
That's
Irish.
kind of the nature of what she's saying.
Yes, I'll get there in a minute. Oh well. Okay, I am fey by nature as well as by name, she said, and then her father died, and she was left to shift for herself, and had got onto the stage in a chorus of provincial pantomime, and thence worked her way up. My greatest success, she said, was as the demon queen in Jack and the Beanstalk.
Fee-fi-fo-fum.
Oh my, you smell the blood of an Englishman, eh? Oh dear. I believed her. She must have made a magnificent female Mephistopheles, if I can even say that right. Somebody correct me on that, because I don't know this. Anyway, it was a precarious existence, and when she got the chance of a job with Miss Morgan through the good offices of a mutual cousin, she took it on. Those were the days when table turning was the vogue. Old Miss Morgan was very keen on it and made her new companion lend a hand when she gave a table turning party to some like-minded neighbours. What the hell's table turning?
I think it's a seance.
Is it? Oh my. Okay. And the table, which had hitherto only scraped its feet a little, suddenly rose on its hind legs and chanced a jig. Oh my. Old Miss Morgan was thrilled to the marrow bones, and so, for the matter of that, was Miss Le Fay. And they went at it hammer and tongs. The table proved unwieldy. They got a planchette. You do know your stuff. You will find the key to everything. Naturally, it gave Miss Morgan II a shake-up when she found I had learnt about the sea cave in the way I had. I told her all I knew about the archaeological point of view. Ben Knoll was really Bel or Baal Knoll, and the hill of the sun god, where right down in historical times they burnt the Baal fires on May Eve, the night of Beltane, or Beltania in Irish, I guess. Of recent years, a dear soulful lady had revived the pretty custom, and had even gone so far as to get the vicar to grace the proceedings. Morty vicar. Little did he know what he was assisting in. Planchette had quite correctly declared that the sea cave faced onto the river and was filled by its tidal rise. But Miss Le Fay Morgan, who had been looking at it all yesterday, was not aware
Looking for it. All yesterday, was not aware that the river had shifted its channel during the 13th century, and now came out on the opposite side of Belknol from where it had originally done. Incidentally, it had drowned out a prosperous monastery in so doing. Tradition declared that the monks were a rackety crowd, and one dark night when they were throwing a party, the river shifted its bed and scoffed the lot. Miss Morgan's eyes shone like lamps again when she heard that, for one of the controls that had operated the planchette had claimed to be a dead monk who had died of drowning. Ooh.
Being in an expansive mood, I told her that if she would come down when the neap tides were at their lowest, I would take her out in a boat to have a look at the place. And she booked the appointment forthwith. That set me wondering how I would explain myself to Scotty and the family.
How's he going to get out of bed right now?
Well, yes, indeed. Apparently, they got oodles of stuff through the planchette, including the information about the river Narradec, which another control who called himself, the priest of the moon, was so named after the original river Narradec in the lost continent of Atlantis by Atlantean colonists who had made this district their headquarters. He had also written out for them the words of an ancient hymn to the sun god that ended, "Waft thou my soul down the river of Narradec, bring it to life and to light and to love."
She threw back her head and sang it to me in a deep, humming, resonant undertone, half croon, half chant. That was the end of me. She could do anything she liked with me after that. There was no need for her to say, believe it or not, for something had stirred in me, and I knew with a curious inner certainty that she was telling me through incomplete and
though incomplete and unverifiable,
that this was the truth. And this was the story as told by Vivian Le Fay, the one-time companion of Miss Morgan the First, way back in the 1990s? 1890s.
I'm imagining that's the 1890s, or maybe the 1790s. Who the hell knows? Because, yeah, whatever.
They had persevered.
They had persevered with the
planchette and made various friends on the inner planes. Later on, Miss Le Fay let me see notebooks, and they were certainly most convincing. For who in their senses would have perpetrated such a laborious fraud, and for what purpose? For they went on long after Miss Morgan the First had died, and Miss Le Fay was in possession of her estate. Later on, Miss Le Fay abandoned planchette for a crystal, and then, of course, her notes ceased to be evidential, save for an element of prophecy in their contents, which I must say was most marked. Well, it seemed that the first communicator to avail himself of the line of communication opened by the planchette was a drowned monk, very anxious to explain himself. He apparently wanted to justify what they had been doing at their abbey that had caused the sea to overwhelm them, and wished it to be realized that they had not been a rackety crowd, as tradition averred, but had been experimenting along original lines. And it was an experiment gone wrong, not commonplace debauchery, that had led to the catastrophe. He said, and I could hear him out, that the district had been quite a center of ancient civilization, and that a certain brother, who I suppose nowadays would be called a psychic, had had a lot of queer dreams, and on the strength of these they had gone exploring into the backward and abyss of time, where no Christian ought to go, and had got so fascinated and caught up with the whole thing that it was like taking to a drink, and the old abbot was the worst of the lot, fairly mad on it. The little monk who came through was nobody in particular, just one in the rank and file, and always thoroughly scared of the whole proceedings. In fact, he would not talk about them more than he could help. All he wanted was to have masses, and said for his soul, so that he could settle down and get some rest. Oh, so he's walking between the worlds kind of stuff.
Yes.
So Miss Morgan the First arranged to have masses for the whole party, finding the local priest unexpectedly sympathetic. Of course, masses have to be paid for, but Miss Le Fay said if it wasn't altogether that, he seemed to understand a good deal without having to be told very much. They were not sorry to see the last of the little monk, as he blurbed away about his sins and wouldn't tell them about things that they were interested in, which I suppose after all were his sins, but not in the way that he understood them. So they cleared the line and tried for someone else, and this time they landed a big fish that Precious nearly pulled them in. Oh.
Oh dear.
At any rate, they had landed the spirit who said he had been on that had communicated with the old abbot through the mediumistic monk. This individual called himself Priest of the Moon, and believe me, he was a heavyweight. I met him afterwards, and I know. He apparently didn't mind about sin. He was anxious to revive the old worship and get back to work again.
Well. Want me to go?
Yeah.
So, these two good women undertook to lend him a hand. God knows why, with the example of that drowned-out monastery before their eyes. But these things have an extraordinary fascination, like, as I said before, taking to drink. For here was I doing exactly the same thing myself, with the awful example staring me in the face equally. Well, Miss Morgan was pretty ancient, and Miss Le Fay, by her own account at any rate, no chicken. And the old lady began to sicken for her last illness, and had to be nursed night and day. So there was no chance for any more spooking for the time being. But old Miss Morgan made Miss Le Fay promise that she would carry on with the job as soon as she was free to do so, and left her money on that condition, though of course it did not appear in the will. And then, thanks to my unlucky pater, there was no money worth mentioning to leave, so all the plans were hung up. Now, however, that things were improving. Miss Le Fay wanted to open up matters again, and wanted my help in so doing. She put it quite as a business deal. She wanted a property purchasing and putting in order, but I felt pretty certain she had got a few cards up her sleeve that she wasn't putting on the table at this moment. So Miss Morgan the second took her scanty pittance and went to live on the continent, as many other old maids in straitened circumstances had done before, living being cheaper there than here. But she took her planchette with her and presently purchased a crystal, and the priest of the moon apparently came along too. Anyway, the work went forward, in theory, if not in practice. And then a queer thing began to happen. Miss Le Fay, or Miss Le Fay Morgan, as I suppose she ought to be called now, considering herself in the sear and yellow leaf, was in the habit of knocking about alone in these Latin countries in a way a young girl couldn't dare do. But presently she found it didn't pay. The local bucks began to make themselves an awful nuisance, especially after she had spent the evening with the planchette and the priest of the moon, and as soon as she began with the crystal, things became impossible, and she jolly well had to watch her step if she were young and lovely.
Oh, yeah.
It took her a long time to realise things, for she was wearing out Miss Morgan's wardrobe. But one day a dressmaker offered her a job displaying styles at the races, and you could have knocked her down with a feather. She took on the job and had a high old time, and then she went back to the stage again. She never, she said, caught on in the Anglo-Saxon countries, where they liked their chickens tender, but in Latin countries, where they appreciate it for its own sake, she was Queen of the May. She was out in the Argentine at the time when it was opening up. She was out in Mexico in the great days, and knew Diaz. And anyway, with that one thing and another, I didn't ask her too closely what they were, she got a bit of money put by. Enough with what she had from the estate to save her from the need of working. And she had come home to London and settled down in the flat come hayloft where Scotty found her, and got busy in good earnest. It was no wonder Scotty, being Highland Gaelic, took fright at the hayloft, for it was where she did her stunts. Those were the bulletins up to date, and then the cash began to come in bulk, and she saw that the time was ripe for carrying out the original plan. She also saw, however, that Scotty was in for a fearful attack of the Calvinistic conscience, and to explain to him what she had explained to me was perfectly useless, and that if she couldn't straighten things out in some way, she was going to have trouble. She guessed, however, having known the old man, that I may be a horse of a different stable, so she had come down on spec, also to spy out the land with a view to her forthcoming scheme, and found that I, all unknowingly, had crossed the same trail. And do you believe me now? She said at the end of it all. Yes, I said, I do. For if you were telling lies, you would tell better ones than these. Then in came Sally with my tea and looked as taken aback. Yes, and taken aback as if she had seen a ghost when she perceived that I had company. She hung hovering in mid-air for a moment or two, not quite sure which way she was going to take things, for, as I remarked before, I had got the dog's job with her, and not even an old-age pension kills out the old Eve in the feminine breast. However, in the end, she apparently decided that the lovely lady would cheer me up, so she fetched another cup and cut some more bread and butter with good grace. I was truly thankful for that, For if Sally had turned awkwards, we had the makings
Of a mess. All right.
Done, done, done.
So I
We're
think
up to chapter 8. I think that's probably chapter 8 is quite long.
small.
Is it quite small?
Yeah, but I think that's good because apparently there's issues because I keep getting text from the stores.
Oh no, I know. Well, I texted her back saying that I could possibly, if the internet comes up, fix the register later, but I'd have to Z it because she can't Z it because it needs the internet to Z.
Anyway, and then
So there you go.
it needs the internet to see.
It does because it has to look up things that it's missing, so it'll probably...
Okay, but then the drawer flies open, so I think I don't know what we're going to do.
Well, I guess
Anyway.
we can go out there, but we're pretty pointless.
Well, we don't need to have all this discussion at book club. I'm
No,
sorry.
no.
But as you can see, we never
Interesting
have a dull moment.
times. We live in interesting times, don't we? Oh,
It's all
my.
good. All right. So chapter 8 is where we're up to. See Priestess.
Isn't this a good book, Boys and Girls?
Well, it's fun, but you have to kind of... It's
You've
like
got
almost
to get
reading
into
a half...
the way it's written because
Yeah,
it's like...
Speak funny.
It is. It's we got 45 minutes book reading, yay. I hope things work out in the shop register. Yes, so do we.
Technology.
Yes, Spectrum's intertube's not working. Not well.
Been rough.
It has. Oh, what?
Anyway, thank you all very much. That was cool. We did, 3 chapters tonight?
3 chapters. It is good. It's very captivating, I have to say.
Well, there's something to brewing. And I think it's interesting that we have Lemurian crystals, right? We have those crystals that you could read. Lemurians and they're like a laser, or
Like
they
seed
call them
crystals.
seed crystals. Yeah. So.
Fascinating.
Fascinating.
Captain. Oh well, what are we going to do? What's that? I love the first person narrative. Well, that's what's good. It's written in the first person narrative, and so it's written. It's actually it's the
This one's much older.
the estate. It is much older, isn't it?
The estate agent.
Yes, that one went to England and came back, but they're pretty much
They're not
identical.
older.
This is just different printing. I don't know what
Yeah.
one that is.
I'm looking.
She's looking.
2003.
All right, what's that one then?
The original was 1935.
1935. Copyright Society of the Inner Light, eh? There you go. 1935. Oh my
This
goodness.
one's print is a bit smaller.
Yeah, I think it is. So it's amazing the pages still match up.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Alrighty then.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It was a pleasure. Now we have to go do battle and fix something that's
And
broken.
Tomorrow, Thursday, is the last Reiki by donation for this class.
It is.
So if anybody's interested, give us a call and book a spot.
Except you're not going to get through right now.
Tomorrow. Call tomorrow.
Yeah. What are you going to do? All right. Well, thank you so much, peeps, and thank you for your patience and
You
understanding
can hear
while we try.
Skittles. She wants dinner. Demanding.
Didn't she get dinner? Didn't you
No.
just feed her? I thought
Only
you
dry
got
food.
her.
It's wet food.
Oh no.
She saw it all come in.
She's
The chewy order has arrived. Come
well,
feed
she's
me.
not going to eat the entire chewy order, is she? That won't do.
And she has an opposable thumb, so she can't get the can open.
Oh, there's your issue then. Otherwise, you'd be utterly superfluous, wouldn't
That's
you?
right.
When cats can open tins, we're buggered. All right, peeps.
Anyway,
we love
thank
you,
you
small
all.
pieces.
We'll see you
Thank you so
soon.
for joining us, and we will see you very soon. So,
Bye.
yes, give us a shout if you want Reiki tomorrow.
Saturday's Psychic Fair, too.
Psychotic
don't
Fair,
forget.
and we've got Jess coming up.
Oh, yeah. We
got
check
Jess
the
coming up to
events.
do some biofeedback
Yep.
stuff. So
Check events.
come
check
check
events.
out our events and come and join us on. We're going to have things on the lawn and all that malarkey. And rumor has it that the wonderful Linda is going to make cookies.
Yep.
They're good. I warn you, they're good. All right, we better bugger off because we got things we've got to
Please.
go deal with.
I'm sorry.
Thank you so much.
Very distracted.
All right, be well, be blessed, and we'll catch you next time. Bye for now.